Two of America's most infamous killers, Wade Wilson, the Deadpool killer, and Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, both men unleashed terror on their victims, but what drove their twisted minds? Join us as we dive deep into the chilling similarities and haunting differences between these two predators, revealing the dark psychology that fueled their horrific crimes. This is a journey into pure evil, don't miss it.
Wade Wilson and Richard Ramirez, though separated by decades, share eerie similarities in their backgrounds that foreshadowed their descent into violence. Wade Wilson, known as the Deadpool killer, was born in Tallahassee, Florida, and grew up in an environment marked by domestic violence and instability. His early years were fraught with exposure to aggressive behavior, leading to his own issues with anger and impulsivity. From a young age, Wilson displayed signs of aggression, often getting into fights at school and showing little remorse for his actions. His troubled upbringing left deep scars that would later manifest in his brutal crimes. In contrast, Richard Ramirez, who would become infamous as the Night Stalker, was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas. Ramirez's early life was marked by a similar exposure to violence and instability. He was the youngest of 5 children in a family struggling with poverty and domestic abuse. His father, a former police officer, was prone to violent outbursts, which deeply affected young Richard. Adding to the turmoil, Ramirez was influenced by his older cousin, Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran who exposed him to graphic stories of violence and even showed him photographs of the atrocities he committed during the war. This early exposure to brutality had a profound impact on Ramirez, warping his perception of violence and death. Both Wilson and Ramirez exhibited troubling behaviors during their adolescence. Wilson's anger and aggression escalated as he grew older, leading to run-ins with the law and a pattern of increasingly violent behavior. Similarly, Ramirez began experimenting with drugs and delving into satanic worship during his teenage years, further distancing himself from any sense of normalcy. The lack of positive role models and the constant exposure to violence set both individuals on a path toward darkness. Despite their troubled upbringings, both Wilson and Ramirez were able to mask their true natures to some extent. Wilson, though prone to outbursts, was able to maintain a facade of normalcy, much like Ramirez, who was described by some as charming and even likable when he wasn't committing his heinous acts. This ability to blend into society while harboring violent tendencies made both men particularly dangerous. The early life experiences of Wade Wilson and Richard Ramirez highlight the complex interplay of environmental factors and psychological predispositions that can lead to the development of violent tendencies. While each had unique circumstances, the common threads of violence, instability, and the lack of positive influences are evident in their backgrounds, setting the stage for their eventual descent into serial killing. Wade Wilson's crime spree began on October 7, 2019, in Cape Coral, Florida, where he brutally murdered 2 women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, within the span of a single day. Wilson's attacks were characterized by their impulsive nature and extreme brutality. He strangled Melton in her home, leaving her lifeless body in her bed, and then stole her car. Later that day, he ran over Ruiz multiple times with the stolen vehicle, leaving her body mutilated beyond recognition. Wilson's crimes were marked by a frenzied rage, seemingly driven by a desire to exert control and inflict pain. Richard Ramirez, on the other hand, operated in a more methodical yet equally terrifying manner. During his reign of terror in Los Angeles and San Francisco from 1984 to 1985, Ramirez broke into homes at night, often while the occupants were asleep. He would attack his victims with a variety of weapons, including guns, knives, and hammers, showing no mercy regardless of age or gender. Ramirez's crimes were not just about killing, they were about instilling fear. He would often leave satanic symbols at the crime scenes, taunting both the victims and the police. His victims ranged from young children to elderly adults, making his attacks unpredictable and heightening the sense of terror. Despite their different methods, both Wilson and Ramirez targeted vulnerable victims, primarily women, and both killers derived a sense of power from the fear and pain they inflicted. Wilson's impulsive brutality contrasted with Ramirez's calculated cruelty, but both approaches were rooted in a profound disregard for a human life. Their crimes left communities in a state of fear and shock, as the randomness and savagery of their attacks made anyone a potential target. The murder of Diane Ruiz by Wade Wilson bears some similarities to Richard Ramirez's home invasion murders. Both victims were unsuspecting and going about their daily lives when they were suddenly attacked. Ramirez, known for entering homes in the dead of night, struck fear into the hearts of residents who believed their homes to be safe havens. Wilson's attack on Ruiz, as she walked to work, shattered the sense of safety in public spaces, leaving the community reeling. Forensic evidence played a crucial role in linking both Wilson and Ramirez to their respective crimes. Advances in DNA technology and surveillance footage were instrumental in identifying Wilson, the perpetrator, much like Ramirez's eventual capture, which was aided by fingerprint evidence and a tip from a vigilant community member. The capture of both killers brought a sense of relief to the terrorized communities, but the scars left by their actions would linger long after their arrests. Understanding the psychological makeup of Wade Wilson and Richard Ramirez provides deeper insights into their motivations and behaviors. Wade Wilson exhibited traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder, including a lack of empathy, impulsivity, and aggression. His history of domestic violence and early exposure to a chaotic home environment likely contributed to his violent tendencies. Wilson's use of violence as a means of exerting control and instilling fear suggests deep-seated issues with power and dominance. His tattoos, including swastikas and symbols of aggression, point to a desire to project a menacing image. During his trial, his demeanor was described as indifferent, yet beneath the surface, he likely experienced significant anxiety and stress, as indicated by his body language. Richard Ramirez, on the other hand, is often cited as a textbook case of psychopathy. He exhibited a charming and manipulative exterior that concealed his complete lack of empathy and remorse. Ramirez's intelligence and charisma allowed him to deceive those around him, making him a particularly dangerous predator. He derived pleasure from manipulating his victims and the attention he received from the media. Ramirez's fascination with satanic rituals and symbols also played a significant role in his psychological profile, adding a layer of ritualistic behavior to his crimes that Wilson did not display. Both Wilson and Ramirez demonstrated an ability to compartmentalize their violent actions, showing little to no emotional response to their crimes. This detachment is a hallmark of their psychological disorders, allowing them to act without guilt or fear of consequences. However, while Ramirez was more calculated and ritualistic in his killings, Wilson's actions were driven by impulsive rage, reflecting different psychological underpinnings. The analysis of both killers reveals the complexities of their mental states, where deep-seated issues with power, control, and identity played critical roles in shaping their behaviors. Wilson's impulsive aggression and need for dominance were manifest in his crimes, while Ramirez's psychopathy allowed him to meticulously plan and execute his horrific acts. Both men used violence as a means to exert power over their victims, but their psychological profiles reveal different paths that led to the same tragic end.